In 2025, U.S. immigration enforcement has taken a dramatic turn. From secret nighttime deportations to families torn apart without warning, thousands from Asia are being sent back home. But which countries are on the list? And why are some governments refusing to take their people back? This isn't just policy, it's real lives in crisis. Stay with us as we count down the 10 Asian countries now facing the harshest deportation actions by the U.S. and uncover the shocking reasons behind each one. Number 10. Iran. Iranian nationals are increasingly facing U.S. deportation actions in 2025 amid tightening immigration policies. Though the Iranian immigrant population in the U.S. is relatively smaller than some others, political tensions have heightened scrutiny. Many Iranians entered the U.S. via student or visitor visas but failed to renew or maintain legal status. Others arrived through Latin America in hopes of seeking asylum, often claiming religious or political persecution. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has focused on nationals from hostile states, and Iran tops that list. Despite no formal diplomatic ties, deportations are coordinated through third countries like Qatar or Turkey. Iran rarely cooperates directly with ICE, often declining to verify identities or issue travel documents. Consequently, many Iranians remain in detention centers for prolonged periods. The lack of a functioning embassy in Washington has left deportees without proper consular access. Legal organizations have challenged the deportation of Iranians with credible fear claims. Iranian-American groups argue these removals are politically motivated and violate basic due process. In 2024 alone, over 400 Iranians were deported, many through indirect routes. ICE continues to maintain that national security concerns override diplomatic complications. Iranians with expired visas or failed asylum cases are now classified under high-priority removal lists. This growing trend has sparked fear and uncertainty among Iranian immigrants across the U.S. Tehran, however, has largely ignored these developments in state media. Number 9. Afghanistan. Afghanistan remains a top focus in the 2025 U.S. deportation wave, especially following the withdrawal of Temporary Protected Status (TPS) protections. Although thousands of Afghans were admitted during the 2021 evacuation, not all were granted asylum or long-term visas. Many are now facing removal after being denied refugee status in immigration courts. Deportations to Afghanistan are particularly sensitive due to the Taliban's control of the country. As a result, the U.S. uses indirect return routes through countries like Qatar or Panama. Some Afghan deportees claim they will face immediate danger upon return, especially former translators or civil society workers. Nonetheless, ICE has moved forward with removals, often at night and with limited notice. Afghan families are frequently separated, with minors left in shelters. Legal aid groups are overwhelmed with appeals and emergency filings. Advocacy organizations argue the U.S. is violating international agreements by deporting Afghans to a conflict zone. ICE insists all deportations are done with full legal process and based on final removal orders. The Taliban government has not publicly responded to these returns, but some deportees have reportedly been detained. Nearly 900 Afghans have been removed since late 2023, with the numbers rising monthly. These cases often involve failed asylum seekers who entered through the southern U.S. border. The future remains uncertain for thousands still stuck in legal limbo across American detention facilities. Number 8. Uzbekistan. Uzbekistani nationals, though a lesser-known immigrant group in the U.S., are now facing rising deportation numbers in 2025. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security recently classified Central Asia as an emerging concern due to irregular migration. Many Uzbeks have entered the U.S. through Mexico, using human smuggling networks that span Eurasia and Latin America. Most of these individuals file asylum claims, citing political persecution or lack of safety back home. However, the U.S. has rejected a large number of these applications, citing insufficient documentation. Uzbekistan, unlike some neighboring countries, has shown willingness to cooperate with ICE. In early 2025, nearly 90 Uzbeks were deported in a single flight coordinated by DHS. Deportees include those with expired visas and others with minor criminal records. Legal groups argue that some of the deported individuals never had proper legal representation. The Uzbek government has confirmed receipt of these returnees but offered limited reintegration support. Human rights activists warn that some deportees could face interrogation or surveillance upon arrival. Most of the deported Uzbeks were held in U.S. detention centers for weeks or months. While the U.S. government hails this cooperation as a diplomatic success, migrant rights organizations remain critical. Deportation hearings for Uzbeks have surged in courts across New York and Chicago. Families left behind face immense emotional and financial distress. The long-term impact on U.S.-Uzbek migration trends is yet to be seen. Number 7. Sri Lanka. Sri Lankan nationals are quietly becoming part of the expanding deportation efforts by U.S. immigration authorities in 2025. While not typically seen as a major source of irregular migration, a rising number of Sri Lankans have been apprehended at the U.S. Mexico border. Most claim asylum based on ethnic persecution or political instability back home. However, ICE has flagged many of these cases as fraudulent or unsupported by evidence. Deportation orders for over 3,000 Sri Lankan nationals have been finalized as of this year. Sri Lanka's government has generally complied with repatriation requests but insists on pre-deportation interviews. These measures delay the removal process and keep detainees in legal limbo. Many deportees say they were misled by agents promising safe passage and legal entry. Human smuggling routes involving Brazil, Nicaragua, and Mexico have played a major role in this surge. Deportees returned to Colombo often face intense questioning by local authorities. U.S.-based Sri Lankan communities are now organizing legal support groups to assist those facing removal. ICE maintains that all deportations are lawful and necessary to maintain border security. The Department of State has warned of stricter visa processing for future Sri Lankan applicants. Deportation flights now leave monthly from Texas to Sri Lanka with growing numbers. Affected individuals often express shock at how quickly their cases are processed and denied. Legal advocates are now challenging many of these removals in federal courts. Number 6. Nepal. Nepali immigrants, particularly undocumented workers and overstayed students, are among those now being deported from the United States at an increased pace in 2025. The termination of TPS, temporary protected status, protections has put nearly 9,000 Nepalis at risk of removal. Many had fled natural disasters or political turmoil and were previously allowed to stay under humanitarian grounds. Without TPS, ICE has started issuing notices to appear in court or directly detaining individuals. Deportation flights have already transported dozens back to Kathmandu this year. Nepal's government, while cooperative, has requested the U.S. to provide adequate time for repatriation coordination. Most deported Nepalis worked in service jobs or low-income sectors like agriculture and caregiving. Legal groups argue they contribute significantly to the U.S. economy and deserve pathways to regularization. Many of those removed left behind U.S.-born children or long-term spouses. The Nepali embassy has reported being overwhelmed by calls from anxious families. Some detainees have been kept in ICE facilities for weeks without proper medical care. Advocacy groups warn that removing TPS recipients violates humanitarian commitments. Nevertheless, removals continue with little media attention. The community feels betrayed, having built lives in the U.S. only to be forced out suddenly. Legal battles are ongoing in several U.S. circuit courts to reinstate TPS or delay deportations. ICE's stance remains firm on enforcing existing laws without exception. Number 5. Pakistan. In 2025, the U.S. has intensified deportation efforts involving Pakistani nationals due to rising concerns over border security and visa violations. Many of those being deported had entered the U.S. on valid visas but overstayed, while others attempted an authorized entry through the southern border. Pakistan is one of several countries listed by ICE as delayed in issuing travel documents, often prolonging deportation procedures. Some detainees remain in U.S. custody for months awaiting consular interviews or identification confirmation. The Pakistani government cites the need for accurate verification to prevent wrongful deportations. However, U.S. authorities argue this is slowing down the legal process and creating backlogs. Deportation flights to Islamabad and Lahore have resumed on a bi-weekly basis. Several of these flights include individuals previously denied asylum or found guilty of immigration fraud. Pakistani community leaders in New York, Houston, and Chicago have voiced concerns about increasing immigration raids. Families have reported sudden arrests during routine ICE check-ins. In many cases, detainees are separated from their U.S.-born children. Pakistan's embassy in Washington has provided legal resources and emergency support for affected citizens. Over 3,000 Pakistanis are currently in the final stage of deportation orders. Human rights groups have criticized the U.S. for removing people who could face persecution in Pakistan. The issue is straining U.S. Pakistan diplomatic relations, already tense over regional security concerns. Both governments are negotiating new protocols for faster yet safer repatriation practices. Number 4. Vietnam. Vietnam is increasingly involved in U.S. deportation discussions due to a growing number of undocumented Vietnamese nationals being targeted in 2025. Historically, an agreement between the U.S. and Vietnam protected those who arrived before July 12, 1995, from deportation. However, recent policy changes have reopened removal cases, even for long-term residents. This has caused distress among Vietnamese American families who thought their loved ones were safe. ICE estimates that over 8,000 Vietnamese nationals are currently subject to removal proceedings. Vietnam has recently agreed to speed up identity verification within 30 days upon request from U.S. authorities. Most deportees are individuals who overstayed visas, committed minor legal violations, or failed asylum cases. Deportation flights have resumed after a long pause during the pandemic. Vietnamese consulates in Houston and San Francisco are working with ICE to process documentation. Legal organizations argue many deportees came as children and have no family or support in Vietnam. Upon return, these individuals often face homelessness and severe mental health challenges. Community groups have launched emergency housing and reintegration programs in both countries. Deportations to Vietnam have now become a monthly occurrence, with over 500 carried out since January 2025. Family separation remains a major concern, especially in cases involving mixed-status households. Advocacy campaigns are pressuring Congress to reinstate protection clauses for pre-1995 arrivals. Meanwhile, Vietnam maintains a cooperative but cautious stance in dealing with deportation logistics. Number 3. Philippines. Filipino nationals continue to be among the most impacted by U.S. deportation policies in 2025, particularly in California, Texas, and Hawaii. The U.S. government estimates over 370,000 undocumented Filipinos currently reside across the country. Deportations have increased as ICE cracks down on overstayed tourist, student, and work visas. Many Filipinos entered legally but lost status due to job losses or expiring documents. The Philippine government has expressed deep concern over the removal of longtime residents and elderly workers. Some deported individuals had been in the U.S. for over 20 years without criminal records. To aid returnees, Manila has introduced reintegration funds and job placement services. Deportees often face challenges adjusting to life back in the Philippines, especially if they've spent most of their lives abroad. The Philippine consulates in Los Angeles and New York are flooded with emergency support requests. ICE maintains that removals are based on lawful proceedings and not targeted by ethnicity. Legal aid groups report a backlog of deportation defense cases in immigration courts. Family unity is a recurring issue, as many deportees leave behind children who are U.S. citizens. Community organizations are lobbying for a legal pathway to citizenship for long-term undocumented residents. Over 1,500 Filipinos were deported in 2024 alone, and projections show even higher numbers in 2025. The Philippine Senate is now reviewing bilateral agreements with the U.S. related to migration and labor. Deportation fears are spreading among Filipino communities, even among those with valid status. Number 2. China. Chinese nationals are among the largest groups facing deportation from the United States in 2025, especially following recent shifts in border migration trends. Thousands of Chinese migrants have been apprehended at the southern border after making long treks through South and Central America. ICE has labeled China minimally cooperative, due to delays in travel document processing and lack of timely communication. Deportation efforts continue despite tense diplomatic relations and accusations of human rights violations. Many Chinese deportees claim persecution for religious or political reasons, especially those affiliated with underground churches or minority ethnic groups. However, U.S. courts often reject these asylum claims for lacking evidence or credibility. Deportations are carried out through chartered flights, sometimes via third countries like Thailand or Singapore. Chinese consulates are often reluctant to issue emergency travel permits without prolonged investigations. The backlog of cases in immigration courts has left thousands in limbo. Legal organizations in California and New York are overwhelmed with appeals and emergency motions. Most deportees come from provinces like Fujian and Zhejiang, which have established migration networks. Many arrived using fake documents or through human smuggling rings. ICE reports show over 2,000 Chinese nationals deported in 2024, a significant rise from previous years. Families are deeply impacted, with some having lived in the U.S. for more than a decade. Activists warn that mass deportations to China could result in post-return surveillance or punishment. Nevertheless, removals continue under strict national security classifications. Number 1. India. India remains the leading Asian country with the highest number of deportations from the United States in 2025. ICE data shows that more than 18,000 Indian nationals are in various stages of the deportation process this year. Many Indian migrants attempt to enter the U.S. illegally via the U.S. Mexico border, lured by human smuggling networks operating in Latin America. Others overstay their student or employment-based visas. Deportation flights to cities like Amritsar and New Delhi have become more frequent, especially since mid-2024. India has faced criticism for delaying travel documents and consular interviews, leading to prolonged ICE detentions. However, Indian authorities argue that due diligence is necessary to prevent wrongful deportation. Deportees report harsh detention conditions and limited access to legal counsel in the U.S. A growing number of Indian deportees include asylum seekers from Punjab and Gujarat, citing political or religious persecution. Most asylum claims are rejected, deemed inconsistent or not meeting the credible fear standard. Family separation is a key issue, especially for deportees with children born in the U.S. The Indian diaspora has launched legal defense funds and mental health services to support returnees. Over 1,500 Indians were deported in 2024, with even higher numbers projected for 2025. Community advocates are demanding legislative reforms to address long-term overstayers. Despite diplomatic assurances, India remains under pressure to expedite repatriation procedures. The future of U.S. India immigration cooperation depends heavily on how these cases are managed going forward. I hope you like this video. Stay blessed. Goodbye.